The story of Atlantis begins not with explorers or maps, but with a philosopher sitting in ancient Athens, nearly 2,500 years ago. Plato, the great thinker, wrote about a civilization so advanced, so powerful, that it seemed almost divine. He called it Atlantis, a mighty island nation beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now know as the Strait of Gibraltar. He described it as a place of unimaginable beauty, where silver and gold decorated the temples, where the air shimmered with light, and where knowledge flowed like water through marble streets. But, as Plato wrote, the Atlanteans grew greedy. Their power turned to arrogance, their wisdom to pride, and one day, in a single night of misfortune, Atlantis sank beneath the waves, swallowed by the sea, leaving behind only legend. For centuries, people believed it was just a story, an allegory meant to teach moral lessons about hubris and corruption. Yet, something about it lingered. Something about the way Plato wrote with such vivid detail made scholars wonder if there was more to it. Could Atlantis have been real? Long before maps existed, ancient sailors told tales of mysterious lands beyond the known world. They spoke of islands where strange lights glowed at night, and waters that were unnaturally warm. These stories reached the ears of philosophers, travelers, and dreamers, and Atlantis began to grow beyond Plato's pages. It became a symbol of a lost golden age, a memory humanity could almost feel but not prove. Imagine the world then filled with gods, myths, and mystery. Every storm on the sea felt like a message from Poseidon, the god who, according to Plato, had created Atlantis himself. Poseidon had fallen in love with a mortal woman, Plato, and built a great island home for her, surrounding it with rings of water and land, protected by massive walls of red, white, and black stone. Their children, 10 sons, ruled the land, and from them came the first Atlantean kings. For generations, Atlantis was said to have been a paradise, not just of wealth, but of balance. The people lived in harmony with nature and the gods. They built palaces and temples that shone with orichalcum, a mysterious metal set to glow with a fiery light. They studied astronomy, philosophy, and engineering, and their ships ruled the seas. But as the centuries passed, they forgot their divine origin. They hungered for more land, more power, more glory. And it was then that the gods decided to humble them. Plato's account describes a war between Atlantis and ancient Athens, a conflict between the disciplined, moral society of Greece and the decadent, powerful empire of the sea. The Athenians, despite being vastly outnumbered, stood their ground, embodying the virtues of courage and justice. And when Atlantis fell, it was not by Athens' hand, but by the wrath of nature itself. Some believe this story was purely symbolic, a reflection of the Greek ideal that arrogance invites destruction. But others have spent their entire lives searching for proof. Over the centuries, explorers have claimed to find signs of Atlantis everywhere. In the depths of the Mediterranean, off the coast of Spain, near the Bahamas, and even under the ice of Antarctica. Each theory has its believers, and each discovery brings more questions than answers. Could it be that Atlantis was not just one place, but an idea? A civilization so ancient it predated all recorded history? Ancient maps such as the Piri Reis map show coastlines that shouldn't have been known in the 1500s. Strange structures lie beneath the ocean in places like Japan and Bimini. In the Bahamas, could these ruins be remnants of a world lost to time? Or are they simply tricks of nature, shaped by the tides and imagination? In the early 20th century, explorers and mystics reignited the obsession. Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, claimed that Atlantis once existed in the Atlantic Ocean near the Bahamas, and that its people possessed technologies beyond our understanding: crystal energy, flight, and communication across great distances. He even predicted that part of Atlantis would rise again in the 1960s, though it never happened. The fascination only deepened. Modern scientists have dismissed most of these claims, insisting there's no solid evidence. Yet, the ocean still holds over 80% of its floor unexplored. In its dark depths could lie the ruins of civilizations older than we dare imagine. The myth of Atlantis is more than a story. It's a mirror. It reflects our longing for perfection, for a world that once knew balance, wisdom, and peace, and our fear that greed can destroy it all. Perhaps that's why Atlantis continues to capture our imagination, because it reminds us of what we could be and what we might lose. As the sun sets over the endless horizon, imagine a time when the sea was calm and golden. The towers of Atlantis shimmered in the distance, the air alive with music and laughter. Children played on the marble steps of temples, while philosophers discussed the stars. Ships returned home, heavy with treasure and discovery, and beneath the waves, Poseidon watched, silent, patient, knowing that paradise never lasts forever. Because when the earth began to tremble and the sea roared like thunder, no one believed the end was real until the waters rose, and the city of light vanished into the deep. And somewhere, deep beneath the surface, perhaps Atlantis still sleeps, waiting for the world to remember. When Plato first wrote about Atlantis, he claimed the story had come from ancient Egyptian priests, men who guarded the oldest memories of humanity. According to him, a Greek statesman named Solon had once traveled to Egypt in search of wisdom. And there, the priests of Sais told him about a powerful civilization that had existed 9,000 years before their time. They described its glory, its fall, and how it vanished in a single day and night of misfortune. Solon brought the tale back to Greece, but it was Plato who turned it into legend. Yet, for nearly 2 millennia, few took the story seriously. Most believed it was an allegory, a moral tale about human pride. But as the centuries passed, explorers began to challenge old assumptions. What if the Egyptians had truly remembered something real? What if Atlantis had once existed, a civilization lost not by imagination, but by nature's fury? In the age of exploration, when ships began to cross the Atlantic and map the unknown, sailors whispered about strange lands that rose and sank in the ocean. Some swore they saw ancient ruins beneath clear Caribbean waters. Others found islands that appeared one season and vanished the next. To them, these were signs, echoes of a world swallowed by the sea. During the Renaissance, scholars rediscovered Plato's writings and tried to locate Atlantis. The mapmakers of Europe began to sketch its supposed location west of the Strait of Gibraltar, near what is now the Azores. These islands, rising suddenly from the depths, seemed to fit Plato's essay. Description: volcanic, mysterious, surrounded by deep water. Many believed they were the last surviving peaks of the sunken empire. In the 1600s and 1700s, new theories emerged. Some claimed Atlantis lay in the Americas, hidden under the jungles of Central and South America, where ancient civilizations like the Maya and Aztec had built their cities. Their pyramids, aligned with the stars, reminded explorers of Plato's temples and canals. Could it be, they wondered, that the survivors of Atlantis had fled west and founded these new empires? But as fascination grew, so did imagination. Writers, mystics, and adventurers transformed Atlantis into a symbol of lost wisdom. They claimed its people had mastered technology far beyond anything known to man. Crystal energy, levitation, even the power to communicate across dimensions. The line between history and myth blurred until Atlantis became not just a place, but an idea, a dream of perfection humanity could never let go of. By the 19th century, with science and archaeology advancing, the search gained a new seriousness. Scholars began studying ancient geology, looking for signs of catastrophic floods. The story of Atlantis no longer seemed impossible. After all, entire cities had been found buried under sand and ash. Pompeii beneath volcanic rock, Troy beneath layers of forgotten earth. If these places, once thought mythical, cold burial, then why not Atlantis? Then came Ignatius Donnelly, an American congressman who, in 1882, published a book titled Atlantis, The Antediluvian World. It changed everything. Donnelly argued that Atlantis had been the cradle of all ancient civilizations, that the Egyptians, Greeks, and even the people of the Americas had inherited their knowledge from this single lost continent. He claimed the global flood myths found in so many cultures were all memories of Atlantis's destruction. His book became a sensation, sparking a wave of exploration and speculation. Soon, every discovery seemed connected to Atlantis. Strange carvings, underwater formations, and even meteorological anomalies were linked to the legend. Donnelly's ideas inspired countless others, from archaeologists to spiritualists, all convinced that the truth was hidden somewhere beneath the waves. In the early 1900s, technology began to catch up with imagination. Submarines and sonar opened the door to exploring the deep ocean. Expeditions scoured the Atlantic seafloor, searching for ruins, temples, or unnatural formations. Some explorers reported massive stone blocks off the coast of Cuba and the Bahamas, perfectly rectangular shapes lying far below the surface. To believers, it was proof that Atlantis was real. To skeptics, it was just geology at play. Then came the mystics, people like Edgar Cayce, whose visions of Atlantis captivated millions. He spoke of a civilization that used energy crystals to power their cities, of a great explosion that shattered the continent, and of souls from Atlantis reincarnated in modern times to rediscover its wisdom. Though scientists dismissed him, the story spread like fire, merging science fiction with ancient mystery. By mid-20th century, Atlantis was everywhere, in books, films, and art. But while imagination soared, the sea remained silent. No golden temples, no glowing crystals, no remnants of an empire, just sand, rock, and endless water. Yet, the silence itself felt mysterious. It made people wonder, maybe we're just looking in the wrong place. Some proposed the Mediterranean, perhaps the island of Santorini, destroyed by a volcanic eruption 3,600 years ago. Its civilization, the Minoans, were wealthy, artistic, and seafaring. Much like Plato's description, when the volcano erupted, it wiped out their cities in an instant. The destruction sent tsunamis across the Aegean, shaking the known world. Could this have been the real event that inspired the myth? Others pointed to the Caribbean, where strange underwater formations near Bimini caught global attention. Divers claimed to see roads and walls beneath the sea, though scientists said they were natural limestone formations. Still, the resemblance to human architecture was uncanny. As the years passed, one thing became clear. The search for Atlantis wasn't really about geography. It was about humanity. As Nito believed that once, long ago, we were greater than we are now. That somewhere in the distant past, we achieved harmony and power beyond comprehension, and lost it all. Because every time someone looks into the ocean and wonders what lies beneath, they read not just searching for a city, they researching for proof that perfection once existed. That maybe paradise isn't a dream, but a memory. The waves still whisper, the sea still hides its secrets. And as night falls over the Atlantic, the story continues to ripple through time. Half myth, half memory, and completely irresistible. The ocean, vast and eternal, holds memories far older than any civilization. Beneath its surface, continents shift, volcanoes breathe, and mountains rise and fall as if the earth itself remembers the chaos of creation. And for those who believe in Atlantis, the sea is not just water. It is a graveyard of forgotten worlds. In the early 20th century, as geology became a true science, new discoveries began to reshape how humans understood the planet. The theory of continental drift suggested that land masses were not fixed, but moved slowly across the surface of the Earth. This concept, later refined into plate tectonics, gave new life to the legend of Atlantis. If continents could move, rise, and sink, then perhaps Plato's lost island had truly been swallowed by the sea. Scientists began studying the Atlantic Ocean with new technology. Echo sounders, sonar, and submersibles that could map the ocean floor. What they found was astonishing. Deep beneath the waves lay enormous mountain ranges, underwater chains stretching across the Atlantic from north to south. They named it the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. In some places, the ridge rose so high that its peaks almost touched the surface. It was proof that the ocean floor was not static. It was alive, moving, and reshaping the world slowly over millions of years. For believers, this was it. The missing clue. They imagined Atlantis perched atop one of these ridges, a proud continent that had once bridged Europe and America. Then, through volcanic activity or earthquakes, it had crumbled and sunk, leaving only fragments. The Azores, the Canary Islands, and Madeira as remnants of its ancient glory. But science ever cautious, did not agree so easily. Geologists pointed out that the Mid-Atlantic ridge was millions of years old, far older than any human civilization. Atlantis, if it existed only 10,000 years ago, could not have rested there. Still, the discovery made people dream. For every scientific argument, there was always the whisper of what if. Meanwhile, other clues surfaced closer to land. In 1900, sponge divers near the Greek island of Antikythera stumbled upon the remains of an ancient shipwreck, and among the debris, they found something extraordinary. A complex device of bronze gears and wheels. Decades later, scientists would realize it was an ancient computer, a mechanism capable of predicting planetary movements. It became known as the Antikythera mechanism, and too many. It was evidence that ancient civilizations were far more advanced than history acknowledged. If such brilliance existed in known cultures, then what about the unknown? What if Atlantis had achieved technological wonders that vanished with it, tools, machines, or even knowledge that could harness the Earth's forces? The line between archaeology and imagination blurred once again. By mid-century, interest in underwater archaeology surged. Jacques Cousteau, the French explorer, dove into the depths of the Mediterranean, discovering ruins, shipwrecks, and entire cities long forgotten. In 1967, a photograph from near Bimini in the Bahamas captured global attention. It showed what seemed to be a paved stone road beneath the sea. Dubbed the Bimini Road, it fueled the idea that Atlantis might have been in the Caribbean after all. Experts examined the site and concluded the stones were natural limestone formations shaped by ocean currents. But to the public, it didn't matter. The legend had become stronger than science. Every wave, every shimmer of light beneath the water seemed to hint at the impossible, that somewhere down there, beneath layers of coral and time, an empire slept. Still, the ocean gave up its own truths. Not of Atlantis, but of what could have destroyed such a place if it ever existed. Massive undersea landslides called megatsunamis were discovered, events powerful enough to erase islands from existence. Volcanic eruptions under the sea could sink entire land masses in minutes. The Earth, they learned, could reshape itself violently and without warning. One such catastrophe was the eruption of Thera, known today as Santorini. Around 1600 BCE, the blast destroyed the civilization, one of the most advanced cultures of the ancient world. Its cities had plumbing, art, and trade networks that spanned the Aegean. When the volcano exploded, it unleashed tsunamis that wiped out coastal settlements across the region. For some, this was the real Atlantis. Not in the Atlantic, but right there in the cradle of Greek civilization. Modern scientists have since studied Thera's eruption in detail. They believe it was one of the largest volcanic events in human history, capable of darkening skies and changing climates across continents. Entire generations vanished, and myths of gods punishing man with floods and fire began to spread. Could this memory have reached Plato's ears centuries later, reshaped into the allegory of Atlantis? It's possible. Myths often begin with truth and end with poetry. As the search deepened, oceanography revealed another truth. The sea itself preserves nothing forever. Wood decays, metal corrodes, and time erases the delicate traces of human creation. Even if Atlantis had existed and drowned, after 10,000 years, it would be gone, buried under silt, swallowed by a tectonic movement, reclaimed by the abyss. Yet, even with science unraveling possibilities, one question remained unanswered. Why do we still want Atlantis to be real? Why, despite evidence and reason, do people keep looking? Perhaps because Atlantis is more than a lost city. It is a reflection of our greatest fear and our greatest hope. It tells us that human achievement can reach unimaginable heights, but also that hubris, greed, and imbalance can destroy everything. It mirrors the rise and fall of every empire, from Babylon to Rome, from the British Empire to our modern world. Every civilization believes itself immortal, until the ocean reminds it otherwise. And as the 20th century turned into the 21st, satellites began mapping the oceans in ways Plato could never have imagined. From the Caribbean to the Mediterranean, from the Arctic to the South Pacific, every trench and ridge was scanned. Yet Atlantis remained a phantom, always just beyond the reach of certainty. Maybe that is the real magic of the legend, that it cannot be found, Because Atlantis was never just a place. It was a warning, a dream, and a mirror held up to the face of humanity. Plato's writings about Atlantis didn't just fade into obscurity. They ignited one of the most enduring mysteries in human history. But to truly grasp how this single story grew into a legend that would captivate the minds of philosophers, explorers, scientists, and even modern-day dreamers, we need to explore how the idea of Atlantis evolved through the centuries. When Plato first described Atlantis in his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, it was meant to be more than a story. It was a moral lesson. Atlantis, according to him, represented human arrogance and corruption. Its destruction was divine punishment, a warning against pride and greed. But with time, what began as an allegory slowly turned into an obsession, from philosophy to belief. After Plato's death, many of his followers debated whether Atlantis had been a real place or a parable. Some, like Aristotle, dismissed it outright, saying, "He who invented it also destroyed it." But not everyone agreed. The Greeks, who loved myths of lost lands and gods, found the story too fascinating to ignore. Over the following centuries, the legend of Atlantis spread beyond the philosophical circles of Athens. Roman scholars and historians occasionally mentioned it, treating it as a distant myth rather than history. But the real transformation came much later, during the Age of Exploration. The Age of Discovery, Atlantis reborn, the 5th, 10th, and 16th centuries changed everything. Europe was expanding its horizons, discovering new continents, unknown peoples, and mysterious civilizations. When explorers like Christopher Columbus and Amerigo Vespucci sailed into the Atlantic Ocean, many began to wonder, what if Atlantis was out there, waiting to be found? Old maps began to label certain unexplored areas as Atlantis, and travelers' tales started linking newly found lands, especially the Americas, to Plato's Lost Island. In 1627, the philosopher Francis Bacon published a work titled The New Atlantis. Although fictional, it painted a vision of a perfect society living on an isolated island, deeply influenced by science and morality. Bacon's Atlantis was anti, Plato's corrupted empire. It was a dream of progress and enlightenment, yet it proved one thing. The name Atlantis had become far more than a moral fable. It was now a symbol, one that could be reshaped to fit any era's hopes or fears. The hunt for a lost civilization. By the 19th century, the fascination had turned into full-blown obsession. Explorers and scholars started connecting real-world locations to Plato's story. Some believed Atlantis was near Spain. Others claimed it was buried under the sands of Sahara, while some insisted it lay deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean. In 1882, an American politician named Ignatius Donnelly published a book called Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. He argued that Atlantis was not a myth, but the birthplace of all ancient civilizations, from Egypt to the Americas. His theory suggested that when Atlantis sank, its survivors spread around the globe, sharing their knowledge and culture, giving birth to humanity's greatest empires. The book became a sensation. For the first time, Atlantis wasn't just a forgotten Greek myth. It was a scientific mystery to be solved. Donnelly's ideas, though lacking evidence, influenced thinkers, writers, and archaeologists for decades. Atlantis in science, and pseudoscience as archaeology and geology advanced. Researchers began to search for proof. Some believed the Azores Islands, located in the middle of the Atlantic, were the mountaintops of the submerged continent. Others looked toward the Caribbean, pointing to strange underwater formations off the coast of Cuba and the Bahamas. The development of underwater exploration in the 20th century only fueled the mystery. In 1968, divers near Bimini Island in the Bahamas discovered a strange line of large stone blocks beneath the sea, which became famously known as the Bimini Road. To many, it was undeniable proof of Atlantis, a sunken city paved with massive stone slabs. But to scientists, it was simply a natural geological formation. The disagreement between believers and skeptics grew stronger. Yet, what's truly fascinating is how Atlantis managed to stay relevant through each era. When new discoveries were made, people tried to connect them to Atlantis. When unexplained ruins appeared, Atlantis was blamed. When lost knowledge was discussed, Atlantis was credited. It became a universal explanation for the unknown, a myth that adapted itself to every generation's imagination. Atlantis and ancient civilizations. Another reason the Atlantis legend stayed alive was its uncanny resemblance to real ancient societies. The Minoan civilization on the island of Crete, for instance, was an advanced maritime power that suddenly disappeared around 1600 BCE, likely due to a massive volcanic eruption on nearby Thera, modern-day Santorini. When archaeologists uncovered the ruins of Minoan palaces filled with frescoes, plumbing systems, and advanced architecture, many drew parallels with Plato's Atlantis. Could he have been inspired by the memory of this lost Aegean civilization? The destruction of Thera, with its ash clouds, tsunamis, and city ruins buried under lava, mirrored Plato's description of Atlantis' sudden sinking. It was one of the first theories that tried to ground the myth in real history. Atlantis in modern culture. By the 20th century, Atlantis had transcended books and research. It had entered popular culture, from novels to comic books, movies to video games. Atlantis became the ultimate symbol of mystery. Writers like Jules Verne and H.P. Lovecraft wove it into their stories. Disney's animated film Atlantis, The Lost Empire 2001, reimagined it as a technologically advanced underwater kingdom. Even modern conspiracy theorists tied it to extraterrestrial civilizations and ancient aliens. Atlantis, in a sense, became a mirror of human imagination, reflecting what each generation wanted to believe about the past and the future. For some, it represented lost wisdom. For others, forbidden technology or divine punishment. The eternal question, but here's the real intrigue. No matter how many scientific discoveries disprove its existence, Atlantis refuses to die. Why? Because Atlantis isn't just about geography. It's about human longing. The desire to find something lost, something that once held greatness and wisdom beyond measure. Whether it's a sunken city or a forgotten truth, Atlantis symbolizes our eternal quest to rediscover what we've lost. Knowledge, purity, or perhaps ourselves. As one historian once said, Atlantis is not a place we lost. It's a memory we keep chasing. And maybe that's why every time a new underwater ruin is found, every time a mysterious map is uncovered, or every time a diver captures strange structures beneath the sea, the same question echoes again and again. Could this be Atlantis? The search for Atlantis didn't end with philosophers or ancient explorers. It evolved into a global scientific pursuit. In the modern age, the story of Atlantis attracted not just dreamers, but also geologists, oceanographers, and archaeologists who believed there might be truth buried beneath the waves. What began as Plato's moral tale had now become an international mystery that satellites, submarines, and sonar technology were trying to solve. When scientists began exploring the deep sea in the 20th century, they realized how vast and unexplored the ocean truly was. More than 70% of Earth's surface lay hidden beneath miles of water, with mountains, volcanoes, and valleys deeper than anything on land. The discovery of massive undersea ridges and trenches led many to wonder if a sunken continent could really exist. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge, for example, a long chain of underwater mountains running right through the Atlantic Ocean, immediately caught attention. Some researchers speculated that Plato's Atlantis might once have been part of this ridge before sinking into the depths thousands of years ago. In the 1960s and 1970s, oceanic research expanded rapidly. With sonar mapping, scientists could create 3D images of the seafloor. Strange formations were discovered, symmetrical ridges, flat plains, and occasional shapes that looked almost man-made. Each time a new underwater feature was found, excitement rippled through newspapers and television documentaries. Could this be Atlantis? It seemed humanity was obsessed with proving that Plato's island had been real. One of the most talked about discoveries came in 1968 near Bimini Island in the Bahamas. Divers found a line of large rectangular stones beneath shallow waters, stretching for hundreds of feet. The formation looked too perfect, too deliberate to be natural. Believers called it the Bimini Road, claiming it was part of Atlantis's ancient harbor. Photographs spread across magazines and books, fueling the imagination of millions. But geologists soon argued that these stones were actually a natural limestone formation shaped by the movement of tides over thousands of years. Even so, the legend persisted. For true believers, scientific explanations were just excuses to hide the truth. In 2001, a new chapter began when oceanographers discovered mysterious structures deep off the coast of Cuba patterns that looked like geometric pyramids and roads thousands of feet underwater. The story spread like wildfire. The idea that a massive city could lie hidden beneath the Caribbean captured the world's imagination again. Satellite scans, deep-sea drones, and robotic cameras were used to investigate, but the extreme depth made it nearly impossible to study closely. Some researchers claimed the shapes were simply natural geological patterns, while others insisted they were ancient ruins, possibly older than any known civilization. Yet again, Atlantis had found a new, possible home. Over time, theories multiplied. Some scientists argued that Atlantis might never have been in the Atlantic at all. They suggested the Mediterranean Sea, specifically near Santorini, as the real location. The volcanic eruption of Thera around 1600 BCE destroyed one of the most advanced civilizations of the ancient world. Their cities vanished overnight beneath volcanic ash, leaving behind ruins eerily similar to Plato's description of a grand, circular city. Surrounded by water, could the story of Atlantis have been a distorted memory of this catastrophe, passed down for centuries before Plato wrote it down? Many historians think so. Others looked farther south, toward the deserts of Sahara. A satellite image of the so-called Eye of the Sahara, or the Richet structure, in Mauritania, revealed a massive circular formation, nearly 25 miles across. The resemblance to Plato's description of Atlantis's circular canals was uncanny. Conspiracy theorists and YouTubers began calling it the true Atlantis, claiming that over millennia, the sea around it had dried up, leaving the remains buried in sand. The structure's size, symmetry, and erosion patterns indeed looked unnatural, but scientists maintained it was a natural geological dome, formed by uplift and erosion, not by ancient architects. Still, curiosity grew, and expeditions were planned to study the site more closely. Meanwhile, technology advanced faster than ever. By the early 2000s, satellite imaging and ocean floor mapping reached incredible levels of precision. Entire regions of the ocean were scanned, revealing details never seen before. Yet, despite all this progress, no one found definitive evidence of an ancient city beneath the waves. No temples, no roads, no writings, nothing that could undeniably be called Atlantis. For many scientists, that was proof enough that it never existed. But for others, it was only a matter of time. The most fascinating thing about the Atlantis search was not just the hunt itself, but what it said about human nature. People weren't only searching for a city, they were searching for meaning. Every discovery, every new theory, was driven by a desire to connect our modern world with something ancient, powerful, and lost. Atlantis represented the dream of a forgotten golden age, a time when humans were wiser, purer, and closer to the divine. Losing it symbolized the fall of humanity, a theme that still resonates deeply. As more expeditions set sail, some explorers began to combine myths with science. They used Plato's clues about direction, size, and distance from ancient Greece to create digital reconstructions. Computer models were built to simulate possible sinkings, using data from tectonic plate movements, ocean currents, and earthquakes. These simulations showed that parts of ancient landmasses could indeed have disappeared beneath the sea due to shifting plates, but none matched Atlantis exactly. The legend always remained just beyond reach, as if it refused to be found. The rise of the internet brought a new wave of interest. Online forums, documentaries, and YouTube channels reignited debates. Everyone had a theory. Some pointed to Antarctica, saying that under its thick ice sheet lay a buried continent, possibly the real Atlantis. Others connected it to alien intervention, claiming that an advanced extraterrestrial civilization had once visited Earth and been mistaken for gods. While these ideas were often dismissed by mainstream scholars, they showed how deeply Atlantis had become woven into popular imagination. In truth, Even scientists admitted that many mysteries of the ocean remain unsolved. Less than 20% of the seafloor has been mapped in high detail. The rest is still darkness. Unexplored, unseen. Somewhere in that darkness, the idea of Atlantis continues to live. Each discovery of a strange underwater formation or unexplained ruin rekindles the same hope. Maybe this time, we've found it. Atlantis' survival through the centuries, even without proof, proves something remarkable. Stories of power greater than facts. Plato may have invented the tale to teach a moral lesson, but humanity turned it into a timeless quest. It became a bridge between myth and science, faith and curiosity. Whether hidden under the ocean or buried in memory, Atlantis remains more than a lost city. It is a reflection of everything humanity longs for. Wisdom, greatness in the dream that somewhere long ago we were more than what we are now. By the 21st century, Atlantis was no longer just a lost city. It had become a symbol. It represented everything humanity yearned for: knowledge, perfection, and the power to transcend time. From scientists in deep-sea submarines to YouTubers analyzing satellite images, millions of people across the world shared one unshakable belief that somewhere, beneath all the myths and skepticism, there had to be truth. But why? Why was the world still obsessed with Atlantis after more than 2,000 years? It began, perhaps, with something deeply human: the desire to belong to a greater story. Every civilization, from the Egyptians to the Mayans, carried tales of a golden age, a time when humans lived closer to the divine. Plato's Atlantis seemed to be a universal echo of that same longing. A perfect world that fell because of pride. A paradise that vanished because its people forgot their virtues. That moral lesson, hidden under layers of myth, touched something primal in us: the fear of losing everything because of our own greed. By the early 2000s, the myth of Atlantis had found a new home: the digital age. The internet turned the mystery into a community. Thousands of online forums, YouTube documentaries, and podcasts discussed clues, geological evidence, and alleged discoveries. People debated sonar images, grainy underwater photos, and declassified naval maps. Every blurry shape or unusual pattern on the ocean floor became a potential gateway to the truth. It was no longer just historians or archaeologists searching. It was everyone. The world had collectively become an explorer. Some searches were almost poetic. Teams of divers in the Mediterranean or the Caribbean would descend into deep blue silence, holding on to faith more than science. They would return to the surface with shards of coral, stone, or pottery, convinced they had touched the remains of Atlantis. Others approached it with technology, scanning ocean depths with multi-beam sonar, comparing satellite data, or creating 3D reconstructions. The deeper the ocean revealed itself, the stronger the obsession grew. It was as if Atlantis kept moving, always just beyond reach, always teasing discovery. But the more people searched, the more complicated the story became. The ocean, vast and ancient, hides thousands of mysteries: lost ships, drowned cities, volcanic ruins. In some places like the Mediterranean coast of Egypt, entire temples have been found submerged, perfectly preserved beneath layers of sand and seaweed. One site, Heracleion, discovered in 2000 near Alexandria, stunned the world. Statues, jewelry, and pillars lay silently underwater for 2,000 years. For a moment, everyone thought it was Atlantis, but it wasn't. It was real history, but not the one people were chasing, and yet it fueled the hope. If Heracleion could survive beneath the sea, then maybe Atlantis could too. What made the Atlantis story so unique was not its age or its mystery, but its adaptability. Each generation reshaped it to fit its own imagination. During the Renaissance, scholars linked it to the Bible's flood story. In the 19th century, explorers tied it to lost continents like Lemuria and Mu. By the 20th century, Atlantis had become a playground for science fiction writers and conspiracy theorists. Some claimed it was a technologically advanced civilization, powered by crystal energy and forgotten science. Others said it was a colony of alien visitors who vanished after completing their mission on Earth. Psychologists began studying this cultural fascination, Kalin Yite, Atlantis effect. They said the myth persisted because it served a psychological need. It gave people hope that the past had meaning, that something greater than us once existed. It was easier to believe that humanity once achieved greatness and lost it, rather than accept that we've been struggling toward progress all along. Atlantis, in this sense, became not a historical mystery, but a mirror. It reflected both our pride and our longing, but not everyone was chasing dreams. There were real scientists who took the myth seriously, hoping that fragments of truth lay hidden in it. Marine archaeologists, like Dr. Robert Ballard, who discovered the Titanic, argued that while Atlantis itself may not exist, the story might be inspired by real disasters. He pointed to ancient flood events, massive tsunamis and earthquakes that swallowed coastal civilizations around 5600 BCE. The flooding of the Black Sea Basin was catastrophic. Entire communities disappeared overnight as sea levels rose dramatically. Two survivors. It must have seemed like the world itself had drowned. Stories of this cataclysm may have echoed through generations until Plato shaped them into the tale of Atlantis. Other researchers studied geological records. They found evidence of violent eruptions, like the one on Santorini, which destroyed the Minoan civilization around 1600 BC. That event was so apocalyptic, ash covering the sky, villages vanishing under fire and water, that it could easily inspire legends of a fallen empire. For the Minoans, their advanced city of Akrotiri, with its art, plumbing, and architecture, was as close to a paradise as the ancient world could imagine. When it vanished, the memory of that loss might have evolved into the story of Atlantis. Still, even with scientific explanations, the romance of the myth never died. Writers, filmmakers, and dreamers continued to bring Atlantis to life. From Disney's animated film Atlantis, The Lost Empire, to documentaries on the History Channel, the Lost City was reimagined in endless ways, futuristic, mystical, or ancient beyond comprehension. It wasn't about finding it anymore. It was about feeling it. The ruins, the symbols, the fall, they reminded humanity of its own fragility. In some ways, the modern search for Atlantis became less about geography and more about belief. For many, it symbolized the idea that knowledge can be lost, and that maybe, somewhere, the key to understanding our origins still lies hidden. Ancient knowledge, lost technologies, spiritual enlightenment. Atlantis carried all these dreams within it. It was the ultimate what if. As technology advanced, the mystery grew quieter, but deeper. Artificial intelligence, sonar drones, and geological models began revealing new layers of the ocean floor. The data became so vast that human eyes couldn't process it all. Now, computers analyzed the depths for anomalies, strange shapes, unnatural lines, symmetrical ridges. Sometimes, algorithms flagged something interesting, and for a brief moment, excitement flared. But every time, the discovery turned out to be natural. A rock formation, a coral ridge, a trick of light. Atlantis remained a ghost, never disproven, never confirmed. And maybe that was the point. Perhaps Atlantis was never meant to be found. Perhaps Plato's tale wasn't about a real place, but warning a message about the rise and fall of civilizations, the danger of arrogance, and the fleeting nature of power. Yet, the irony is that in trying to find Atlantis, humanity proved Plato right. Our endless curiosity, our refusal to stop searching, our hunger for greatness, all these mirrored the very pride that destroyed the mythical city. As the 21st century moved forward, the search for Atlantis became quieter, but the dream lived on. It survived in art, in stories, and in the human heart. Because no matter how advanced our technology becomes, there will always be a part of us that looks toward the horizon and wonders what lies beyond. A sunken city of forgotten truth, or perhaps the reflection of our own lost innocence. As centuries passed, the legend of Atlantis slipped from the realm of pure mythology into something far more mysterious. The secret doctrines of hidden societies. By the late 18th and 19th centuries, when Europe was awakening to science and philosophy, whispers of Atlantis began circulating among mystics and intellectuals who saw the lost city not as a sunken ruin, but as the cradle of ancient wisdom. To them, Atlantis wasn't destroyed, it was hidden deliberately, waiting to be rediscovered by those spiritually ready to understand its secrets. It began quietly, within circles of theosophists and Rosicrucians. Societies obsessed with decoding the hidden truths of existence. Figures like Helena Blavatsky, founder of the Theosophical Society, claimed that Atlantis was home to an advanced race, the fourth root race of humanity. According to her, Atlanteans possessed psychic powers, superior knowledge, and the ability to manipulate energies far beyond modern understanding. When their arrogance grew, divine forces sank their island beneath the sea. But not all knowledge was lost. Fragments survived through Egypt, Tibet, and even the Americas. These teachings spread rapidly, mixing myth with mysticism. In secret gatherings lit by candlelight, initiates discussed how Atlanteans might have mastered levitation, energy crystals, and telepathy. Some believed the Great Pyramids of Giza and Stonehenge were built with technology inherited from Atlantis. The idea was intoxicating, that beneath the known history of mankind, there existed a forgotten chapter of brilliance and tragedy. The fascination with Atlantis wasn't just spiritual, it was philosophical. For many thinkers of the Enlightenment, the Lost City represented the perfect balance between science and morality. A civilization so advanced that it blurred the line between magic and technology. The tragedy, they said, was not in its destruction, but in its downfall through moral decay. As Europe industrialized and cities filled with smoke, Atlantis became a symbol of warning, a reminder that progress without virtue leads to ruin. In the 20th century, the myth took on new and dangerous forms. Some extremist ideologies began twisting the legend to serve their own purposes. They argued that Atlanteans were a pure race, the origin of all civilization, and that modern nations could trace their superiority back to them. These false interpretations led to horrific consequences, especially during World War II. What had once been a story of human pride became a justification for hatred and conquest. Atlantis, once poetic, was weaponized. But in quieter corners of the world, other groups continued to interpret the story differently. To them, Atlantis symbolized unity, a time when humanity worked together under divine wisdom. In South America, spiritual movements spoke of Lemurian and Atlantean souls reborn to restore balance to Earth. In India, certain mystics linked Atlantis to Dwarka, the ancient city of Lord Krishna said to have sunk beneath the waves. Across cultures, the myth adapted, surviving through religion, art, and faith. Meanwhile, secret societies continued to weave Atlantis into their rituals. The Freemasons, for example, often spoke of a lost knowledge buried beneath the sands of time, a wisdom that could rebuild humanity if read. Their symbols, the all-seeing eye, the compass, the temple, all echoed themes of enlightenment, destruction, and rebirth. Though they never directly claimed ties to Atlantis, the parallels were undeniable. The idea that human civilization had risen and fallen multiple times became central to their philosophy. Build, fall, rebuild, each cycle bringing mankind closer to perfection. In America, the fascination took on a patriotic twist. Early founders like Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson were drawn to the idea of ancient wisdom guiding human progress. Some historians even argue that the symbolism of the Great Seal of the United States, with its unfinished pyramid and radiant eye, was inspired by these esoteric traditions. The Founding Fathers saw America as a new world, perhaps the rebirth of Atlantis' spirit, a civilization founded not on kingship, but on knowledge, balance, and freedom. By the mid-20th century, Atlantis had entered pop culture with full force. Science fiction authors like Jules Verne, H.P. Lovecraft, and later Arthur C. Clarke reinvented it as a civilization of technology so advanced that it seemed alien. Submarines, lost continents, underwater temples, all of it tied back to Plato's tale. Hollywood took note. From early adventure films to animated epics, Atlantis became a visual metaphor for mystery itself. Every director gave it a new shape, some golden and radiant, others dark and haunted. But even beyond movies, the myth inspired serious oceanographers and marine geologists in the 1960s began mapping the ocean floor more precisely than ever before. They discovered massive mid-ocean ridges and trenches, proof that the Earth's crust moved constantly. Suddenly, the idea of a sunken continent didn't sound entirely impossible. Perhaps, they wondered, A massive earthquake or tectonic shift could have swallowed an island long ago. Expeditions were launched across the Atlantic, Caribbean, and Mediterranean, each claiming to be closer than the last. One of the most controversial discoveries came in 1968 near the Bahamas, where divers found strange stone formations off the coast of Bimini, perfectly rectangular and aligned like roads or walls. The site became famous as the Bimini Road. To believers, it was proof the ruins of Atlantis rising from the deep. To skeptics, it was just natural limestone formations shaped by tides and time. The debate grew fierce, and every expedition after that carried both faith and doubt in equal measure. As technology evolved, so did the theories. Satellite imaging in the early 2000s revealed grid-like patterns on the ocean floor near the Canary Islands and Azores, areas that Plato had linked to Atlantis' location. Social media erupted with claims that the lost city had finally been found, but Google quickly clarified that the grids were digital artifacts, traces of sonar mapping, not ancient streets. Atlantis, once again, slipped away like mist between fingers. Yet, even in disappointment, the fascination deepened, because the story wasn't just about finding ruins. It was about finding meaning. Each discovery, each myth, each false lead kept the fire alive. To believers, Atlantis wasn't gone. It existed in another realm, perhaps beneath the ocean, perhaps within our consciousness. They said that its energy still pulsed under the earth, guiding those who sought truth. Modern secret societies still reference Atlantis, not as a place, but as an ideal. They speak of the Atlantean mind, a state of enlightenment humanity once achieved but lost through pride. Their rituals, symbols, and meditations all point toward regaining that balance. The story of Atlantis, they say, is the story of us. The eternal struggle between knowledge and arrogance, light and darkness. And as long as humanity exists, the myth will endure. Because Atlantis isn't just a legend about a city that drowned. At least about the endless human desire to rise again, whether hidden beneath the sea or buried deep within memory. Atlantis remains what it has always been, a mirror reflecting our highest dreams and deepest flaws. The expedition to Santorini had left Elena and her team stunned. The underwater ruins, the peculiar inscriptions, and the discovery of ancient metal fragments hinted at a civilization far more advanced than scholars had ever imagined for that era. But the real surprise came when one of the divers brought up a small, disc-shaped object covered in thick coral. On Siciliane it revealed intricate geometric patterns, spirals intersecting circles, and a central symbol that resembled the Greek letter. Dr. Miles was the first to speak, his voice trembling. This isn't natural, and it's definitely not Greek. We've seen something like this before, in the archives of the Egyptian Library of Alexandria. Back at the university lab, the artifact was scanned and analyzed. The material composition was unlike anything in the known ancient world. It wasn't bronze or gold, or even a mix of common metals. Instead, it contained traces of orichalcum, the mysterious metal Plato had mentioned in his writings about Atlantis. The discovery made headlines, though Elena tried to keep the details secret. If orichalcum truly existed, it would mean Plato's story wasn't just symbolic, it was historical. And if that was true, the entire foundation of Western archaeology would need to be rewritten. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the patterns engraved on the disc. Something about them felt deliberate. She projected the designs onto her laptop screen and began rotating them, searching for hidden meaning. After hours of rearranging the pieces, a shocking pattern emerged. It resembled a map, not of any known landmass, but of an island surrounded by concentric circles. Like Plato's description of Atlantis, rings of water and land, leading to a central citadel. At the center of the pattern was a symbol, the same glowing faintly under infrared light. It almost looked like a warning. The next morning, she called her team together. "This isn't just an artifact," she said, pointing to the map. "It's a coordinate system. Look here." The alignment of the circles matches the layout of underwater ridges near the Azores. Dr. Miles frowned. "You're suggesting Atlantis is in the Atlantic Ocean after all?" Elena nodded. Plato said it lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. Every clue points west, and if this artifact was found in Santorini, it could mean survivors fled east after the original island sank. The team prepared for a new expedition, this time to the Azores. It was a risky journey. The waters there were deep, unpredictable, and often shrouded in thick fog. But the coordinates encoded in the artifact led them precisely to a specific underwater trench. As the submarine descended, silence filled the cabin. Then, the sonar began to ping, rhythmic, steady. "We've got structures," the pilot whispered. Through the glass, faint outlines appeared. Massive geometric shapes buried under silt, perfectly aligned, as though designed by architects who understood advanced mathematics. Alina's heart raced. They navigated closer, shining powerful floodlights across the seafloor. What they saw made everyone fall silent. Gigantic pillars, carved with symbols similar to those on the disk, stretched upward from the depths. Walls formed perfect right angles. One section looked eerily like a staircase descending into darkness. It was impossible. Human civilizations weren't supposed to have built anything like this 12,000 years ago. And yet, here it was, undeniable proof that something once stood here. They took samples, scanned the area, and recorded everything. But as they ventured deeper into the structure, their instruments began to malfunction. Compass needles spun uncontrollably, sonar signals distorted, and strange electromagnetic interference disrupted communication with the surface. The pilot panicked. "We're losing signal." Elena ordered him to surface, but before they could ascend, the lights flickered, and for a moment, a faint glow illuminated the ruins. It came from beneath the seafloor, pulsing slowly, almost like a heartbeat. When they resurfaced, shaken and pale, Dr. Miles finally spoke. "We've crossed into something we don't understand," he said. "If these ruins still emit energy, it means their technology hasn't fully died." Elena stared at the horizon where the sun was setting over the endless Atlantic. "Or it means," she said softly, "Atlantis never truly fell." Bicon land. The media swarmed them. Reporters demanded answers, but Elena refused to share details until their data was verified. However, whispers began to spread of ancient power sources, forbidden energy, and civilizations erased from history. Some called it a hoax, others called it a revelation. The academic world divided in two. Those who believed Elena had uncovered proof of Atlantis, and those who accused her of chasing myths. But for Elena, none of that mattered. What haunted her wasn't fame, it was the pulse she had seen in the deep. A few nights later, while reviewing sonar data, she noticed something she had missed earlier. The rhythmic pulse wasn't random. It followed a precise frequency, one that matched ancient resonance patterns used in temples across Egypt and Greece. It was as if the ruins themselves were broadcasting a message, one humanity no longer knew how to decode. She ran a frequency translation and converted the data into sound. A low, melodic hum filled the room, ancient, powerful, and strangely human. Elena sat back, goosebumps covering her skin. "It's not just ruins," she whispered. "It's a memory." She didn't yet understand what the ruins were trying to communicate, but she knew one thing for certain. The ocean had preserved not just stones, but the voice of a lost world. And somewhere, deep below the surface, that voice was still calling, waiting for someone to listen. Elena didn't sleep that night. The strange frequency from the ruins kept playing in her mind, a deep, resonant hum that felt almost alive. She replayed it over and over, and with each loop, she began to hear faint variations in the sound. It wasn't random. There was rhythm, structure, almost like language. She ran the recording through an audio analyzer, filtering different frequencies. When she slowed it down to 1/6 speed, a pattern emerged. 3 distinct pulses followed by a pause, then 2 shorter beats, repeating endlessly. Dr. Miles joined her in the lab, rubbing his tired eyes. "Still at it?" he asked. She didn't even look up. "Listen to this," she said, pressing play. The low vibrations filled the room again. "It's not just noise, it's a code. Miles frowned. A code? From what? A natural frequency. She shook her head. No. It's deliberate. Someone wanted this sound to be found. They spent the next several days analyzing every bit of data collected from the trench. Alina cross-referenced the pulse intervals with ancient mathematical constants. What she found was staggering, the same ratio used in the construction of the Great Pyramid S-base to height, and in the dimensions of Stonehenge. Somehow, civilizations separated by thousands of years and vast oceans had used identical proportions. It's as if they were all following a blueprint, she murmured, a blueprint that originated with Atlantis. The realization sent a chill down her spine. If the pulse was truly a message, it could mean the Atlanteans hadn't vanished, they had left something behind. Perhaps even intentionally buried under the ocean for someone to discover once humanity was ready. But ready for what? Late one evening, Elena decided to enhance the sound using spectral imaging. When she visualized the frequencies on her computer, a faint shape appeared, concentric rings, just like the ones on the orichalcum disk. But this time, in the center, a different symbol flickered to life. Two triangles overlapping, one pointing up, the other down. A universal ancient sign. Balance, creation, and destruction. She whispered, as above, so below. The phrase echoed through her mind as she dug deeper into old archives, searching for any record of a similar emblem. She found one reference. A fragment of a Sumerian tablet describing a great island that fell when the heavens turned against the earth. The tablet mentioned a voice beneath the sea that would awaken when man repeats the mistakes of the past. Elena's pulse quickened. Was the signal a warning? A message from the past about what destroyed them? 2 days later, she received an encrypted email from an anonymous sender. The subject line read, "You've heard the signal. Meet me where it began." Attached was a single image. The map of the Azores Trench. No explanation. No name. Dr. Miles insisted it was a prank, but something in Elena's gut told her otherwise. Against his advice, she chartered a small research vessel and set out again for the Atlantic, determined to uncover the truth. The sea was calm when they arrived, the same spot where they had found the glowing ruins. But this time the ocean felt different. Heavier, almost charged. As the submersible descended, Elena felt an odd vibration run through the hull. It was fine, rhythmic, the same pulse as before, but faster now. Louder. It was as if the ocean itself knew she had returned. As they reached the seafloor, something extraordinary came into view. A massive circular gate made of black stone, covered in runes that shimmered faintly in the sub's lights. It was half-buried, but unmistakable. A perfect match for the symbol in the sound pattern. "It's a mechanism," she whispered. "The signal isn't just a warning. It's a key." She moved the sub closer, activating a low-frequency sonar to replicate the pattern of the sound they had recorded earlier. The moment the sound waves hit the structure, the runes began to glow brighter, aligning in sequence. The gate vibrated, releasing clouds of silt into the water. Then, silence. Everything stopped. The lights dimmed. The instruments went dead. For a few seconds, Elena thought the sub had lost all power. But then, a faint hum returned, not from the sub, but from the structure outside. And then she heard it. Not a mechanical hum this time, but a voice distant, echoing through the deep. It spoke in a language she couldn't understand, yet somehow she felt its meaning. Images flashed in her mind, towering crystal spires. People walking through radiant cities, energy flowing through the air itself. Then, chaos. Oceans rising, storms swallowing continents, the sky turning red. The final image was a city engulfed in light, before vanishing beneath the sea. Elena gasped and ripped off her headset. Her hands were trembling. "They destroyed themselves," she whispered. "They had technology that manipulated the Earth's energy and it consumed them." Dr. Miles, pale and shaken, looked at her. "If that's true, we're following the same path." She nodded. "The message, it's not just history, it's prophecy." When they resurfaced, Elena could still hear the hum in her ears, as if the ocean had imprinted the sound on her mind. The anonymous sender, contacted her again. This time, the message was clear. You've opened what should have remained closed. Leave now, before the cycle repeats. But it was too late. News of her discovery had already leaked. Governments, corporations, and scientists worldwide were suddenly interested in the Atlantis frequency. Some claimed it could be harnessed as a new form of energy, clean, infinite, and free. Others warned that tampering with it could destabilize the planet. Elena found herself at the center of a global storm she never intended to create. In her final research entry, she wrote, "The pulse beneath the Atlantic is more than sound. It is the heartbeat of a civilization that once reached too far. They warned us. They left us their foe as a mirror of our own fate. The question is, will we listen before the ocean takes us too?" As she closed her journal and looked out over the dark, endless sea, the waves seemed to whisper slow, rhythmic, and familiar. The message hadn't stopped. It was still there, repeating through the ages. A memory of Atlantis, a warning from the deep, and for the first time, Elena truly understood some secrets aren't meant to be found, because they don't just reveal the past, they predict the future. Elena stood on the deck of the ship, the Atlantic wind tearing through her hair as thunder rolled across the horizon. The hum she had discovered that strange, haunting frequency no longer needed machines to be heard. It pulsed through the water, through the air, through the very bones of the planet. Ships far from their location had begun reporting the same phenomenon. A low vibration deep beneath the sea that caused compasses to spin wildly and electronic systems to flicker. The world was waking up to something ancient, something it didn't understand. By the time Elena returned to the mainland, chaos had already begun. The media called it the pulse. Governments denied its danger, insisting it was just a natural magnetic fluctuation. But Elena knew better. Every day, the pulse grew stronger, repeating faster, resonating deeper. She couldn't shake the feeling that the gate beneath the Atlantic, the one she had activated, was no longer dormant. She had opened a door that refused to close. Her lab became her sanctuary. She pored over data, charts, sound patterns, desperate to find a way to stop it. But the pulse was changing. It no longer followed the original rhythm. It was adapting, evolving, as though responding to her world's interference. Her assistant, Miles, watched her with growing unease. "Elena, maybe it's not meant to be stopped," he said quietly one night. "What if it's a reset?" She looked up from her desk. "A reset?" He nodded. "Atlantis fell when they reached the limits of their control. Maybe. The pulse is a natural safeguard, a correction mechanism that activates when a civilization crosses the same threshold." His words hit her harder than she expected. All her research, all her discoveries, the technology, the ruins, the frequency, it all pointed to one truth. Atlantis had created something capable of harnessing the planet's core energy. It was limitless, but unstable. They drew too much power, and when it spiraled beyond control, their entire continent sank beneath the waves. Now, centuries later, humanity was doing the same, splitting atoms, altering climates, drilling into the earth. Maybe, Elena thought, we're not just hearing their warning. Maybe we've triggered their curse. Weeks passed the whom began affecting people. Divers reported hearing whispers underwater. Birds altered migration routes. Coastal towns experienced unexplained blackouts, followed by trembling ground beneath their feet. Elena's recordings showed that the frequency was no longer limited to the Atlantic. It had spread globally, like a heartbeat spreading through the veins of the earth. Then came the first storm. It wasn't like any other. It rose from the sea in a spiral of lightning and gray clouds, the sky pulsing with the same rhythm as the hum. The winds screamed. Waves climbed higher than skyscrapers. Satellites failed to track its center because it moved unpredictably, as if guided by something conscious. Entire coastlines went dark. Elena and Miles watched the footage from their lab in disbelief. "It's following the trench line," he whispered. "The same trench where they found the ruins." Elena's heart sank. "It's trying to surface." They knew they had to return. The answers And maybe the solution lay at the bottom of that ocean. Within days, they assembled a small crew and launched again into the storm-tossed Atlantic. It was madness, but there was no time left. Humanity was staring into the same abyss that had swallowed Atlantis. As they descended, the water was no longer dark, but glowing faintly. Not from their lights, but from the ocean itself. Strange energy currents swirled around them, forming symbols she recognized from the ruins. The gate loomed ahead, wide-opened now, light pulsing from within its core like the heartbeat of a god. "Elena, readings are off the charts." Miles shouted over the alarms. The instruments were useless. Everything electronic failed as the sub neared the structure. The hum grew deafening, vibrating through their bodies until they felt their chests ache. Elena closed her eyes and placed her hand on the glass, staring at the glowing portal. She didn't know if it was madness or instinct, but she spoke aloud. "We understand now. You tried to warn us." For a moment, the vibration stopped. Silence filled the depths. The first true silence she had felt in months. Then, a voice echoed. "Come. Ancient, filled with sorrow," the psycho repeats. "You are the reflection of us, and like us, you will fall, unless balance returns." Tears welled in her eyes. "Tell us how," she whispered. The voice grew softer, fading like a dream. "The power is not yours to command, only to remember." Then, light. Blinding. White. All-consuming. When Elena opened her eyes again, she was lying on a beach. The air was eerily still. Miles was beside her, unconscious but breathing. Their ship was gone, their instruments scattered like debris. In the distance, she saw people gathered, pointing toward the horizon. She turned and gasped. Where the storm had been, the sea had split open, revealing jagged peaks, stone, marble, and crystal. Rising from the depths, towers emerged, domes glistened, and colossal arches stretched toward the clouds. It was impossible, but there it was. Atlantis. The lost city had returned, but it wasn't a resurrection of glory. The structures trembled, flickering like mirages, half real and half memory. The pulse thundered louder than ever, making the ground shake. She realized it wasn't reappearing. It was being remembered, replayed through time itself. A final echo before vanishing forever. She fell to her knees as the vision began to fade. Waves swallowing the ruins once more. Within minutes, the sea returned to its usual calm, as though nothing had happened. The hum was gone. In the weeks that followed, reports flooded in from around the world. The pulse had stopped. The magnetic anomalies vanished, and the ocean's depths returned to silence. Elena was hailed as a hero, but she refused every interview. What she had seen wasn't something to celebrate. It was a warning fulfilled. Late one night she returned to her desk, staring at her old notes. She opened her audio files, expecting nothing. But at the end of the last recording, just as the data cut off, she heard a faint voice, almost human. "Almost divine. Remember what we forgot." She closed her eyes, realizing what it meant. Atlantis was never meant to be found in stone or ruins. It existed as a lesson, a reminder of what happens when power outruns wisdom, when ambition ignores balance. Humanity had been given one last chance to listen. Outside her window, the waves shimmered under the moonlight, calm, endless, waiting. And somewhere beneath them, in the quiet dark, the gate still rested, closed again, but not gone. Waiting for the next time mankind would dare to awaken it, because history doesn't end. It repeats. And Atlantis always returns to those who forget.